So there is a old Jewish saying, rabbis came up with this saying years and years ago, and that is that we do not break the commands of God, we break ourselves against them. It's kind of like if you think about the law of gravity, you never break the law of gravity. You can defy the law of gravity, but then you will be in trouble. It will break you, right? And that's the case with the commands of God in general. We've talked about before that Jesus said, I have come that you might have life, and life to the full. And if you live this way, if you follow me, that is what leads to one of the terms that's often used in the positive psychology movement is flourishing, human flourishing. That's how you find life and life to the full. And if we defy those commands, if we choose to go our own way, we will often get in trouble. Now, this is so abundantly true with the fourth commandment that we're going to talk about today. This is powerful. So in 2017, these three guys, Jeffrey Hall, Michael Rashbash, and Michael Young, were the winners of the Nobel Peace Prize, or the Nobel Prize in Medicine. And they got the Nobel Prize because they discovered a certain protein in our cells. In every cell of our body, there's a certain, well, what they discovered actually is that, I'm going to try to get the pronouncement right here, the pronunciation right, the protein levels in our cells' cytoplasm, that these protein levels oscillate, that they are on more and then they're off more, and that they oscillate in a daily rhythm, otherwise known as our circadian rhythm. And so this daily oscillation, our circadian rhythm, governs our metabolism, eating and sleeping patterns, our coordination and reaction time, and our alertness and cognitive functioning. So working in harmony with our natural circadian rhythm, understanding this, if we live in harmony with that, that enables us to optimize benefits for our health, well-being, our functioning, our performance. Conversely, and importantly, chronic misalignment with our natural circadian rhythms, these natural patterns of oscillation, will lead to serious negative consequences. Now, let's stop and think about this. How mind-boggling it is that built into every single cell in our bodies is this mechanism that oscillates according to the planetary movements, according to where our planet is in relation to the sun. The cells of our body are adjusted to that rhythm. And this is one example of how, in so many ways, there's a rhythm established sort of innate in us, in this world, in all the created world. And we choose whether or not we're going to follow those rhythms or not. And we face the consequences. Now, sometimes in my messages, I will have quotes up on the screen. And some of you really like that, and some of you don't like it. If you don't like it, this is going to be a rough one today, because I'm going to share some wisdom that I've come across over the years. Some people collect, baseball cards and other stuff. I collect quotes, and so here we go. Wayne Muller wrote a book about Sabbath, and here's what he said about this pattern, these rhythms. He says this: when we live without listening to the timing of things, when we live and work in long shifts without rest, we are on wartime, mobilized for battle. Yes, we're strong and capable people. We can work without stopping, faster and faster. Electric lights making artificial days so that the whole machine can labor without ceasing. But remember, no living thing lives like this. There are great machines do, biological entities do not. There are greater rhythms, seasons, and hormonal cycles, and sunsets, and moonrises, and great movements of seas and stars. We are part of the creation story, subject to all its laws and rhythms. To surrender to these rhythms is to savor the secret of life itself. Scientists believe that we are hardwired like this, to live in rhythmic awareness, to be in and then step out, to be engrossed and then detached, to work and then to rest. It follows then that the Sabbath, or the commandment to remember the Sabbath, is not a burdensome requirement from some law-giving entity. You ought, you'd better, you must, but rather it is a remembrance of a law that is firmly embedded in the fabric of nature. It's a reminder of how things really are, the rhythmic dance to which we unavoidably belong. We can choose to defy this law, and we break ourselves against it. Now, as Christians today, we all give lip service to this. The idea of taking a break on the Sabbath, taking a break every 7 days, I don't think is going to be news to anybody here in this room. But the issue is, the challenge is, that is not at all the way our world works. Almost everything about our modern society, it pushes us to 24/7 action, to 24/7 buying stuff, looking at stuff, reading stuff, doing stuff. And so, years ago, if you think about this, years ago, it wasn't even that long historically. What is it, about 150 years ago was the invention of the electric light? 200 years ago? Whatever. Let's say 150 years ago, you had to stop at night because the light was not good. So that forced you. The patterns just forced you. I mean, in some ways, here in Minnesota, we have the pattern, the season of summer and winter, and so that forces us to live a certain way. But we have good clothing, and we have heated houses, and so really you can almost live as if seasons don't even matter. We can work anywhere. It's someone said that it used to be you could go on an African safari, and no one would hear from you for 2 months. No one could reach you for 2 months. But now you go on African safari, you carry that stupid phone, and if anyone can reach you, they will reach you when you're on African safari, because we're never away. We never get a break. We never stop. So we live in this pattern of always on. Used to be, you would have work, you'd go to work, and you'd have these responsibilities, and then you go away from work and they would be gone. But now they follow you through your phone and through email that you have to check and make sure you're up to date with everything. So we live this command, or we can live this command, and if we do, it can really change us. Now, I don't know about you. I've talked about this before, that I grew up going to church, and we read the 10 Commandments every week, and we talked about the 10 Commandments. And this was a big deal in the church I grew up in. Honor the Sabbath by keeping it holy. And the deal was, for some reason, the command was, you shall not work on the Sabbath. And my parents, I think, heard that to say, you shall not have fun on the Sabbath. So it was like all these restrictions, right? And so the weird thing was, we had certain restrictions. My friends had other restrictions. So we could not watch TV, but we could ride our motorcycles. My friend, they could not ride their motorcycles, but they couldn't watch TV. If they wanted to watch TV, they'd come to our house. And if we wanted to, whatever, if we wanted to ride motorcycles, they'd come to our house. Anyway, you get the idea. We just move around because different people had different restrictions and just really weird about it. This is a gift to us. This is a blessing to us. Jesus, or God says, remember the Sabbath, keep it holy. 6 days labor, and the seventh is a Sabbath. Don't do any work. So let's talk about why, and then we're going to talk about how. So why we do this, I suppose, should be evident. I've been hinting at this all along, but Jesus makes it like explicit. This is not something you do in order to get God's favor. This is something you do because it's how you can live the best. The Sabbath was made for us. It's a gift to us. It's not a burdensome thing a hoop that we jump through to somehow be pleasing to God. We need this, in other words. So Ronald Rolheiser, a great book called Holy Longing, and he talks about this inner restlessness. So listen to what he says. It's no easy task to walk on this earth and find peace. Inside of us, it would seem something is at odds with the very rhythm of things, and we are forever restless, dissatisfied, frustrated, and aching. We diagnose that as anxiety and depression today, but it is this deep inner restlessness. We are so overcharged with desire that it's hard to come to simple rest. Desire is always stronger than satisfaction. Put more simply, there is within us a fundamental dis-ease, an unquenchable fire that renders us incapable in this life of ever coming to full peace. Stop there for a second. This is why we work like crazy, and then we get into bed, and then our mind starts to spin with all the things we should worry about, all the things that we should do, all the things that aren't going well, right? It's like it never stops. This desire lies at the center of our lives, in the marrow of our bones, in the deep recesses of our soul. We are not easeful human beings who occasionally get restless. We're not serene persons who once in a while are obsessed with desire. The reverse is true. We are driven persons, forever obsessed, congenitally diseased, living lives, as Thoreau once suggested, of quiet desperation, only occasionally experiencing peace. So if you think about this dis-ease of the soul, this constant yearning, this constant push to get more, to be more, to solve all the problems so we can be calm and peaceful, that is sort of like the human condition that's part of our being fallen human beings. And when God comes into our lives and God gives us we first of all have the forgiveness of sins and hope of a new life, but we also have the Holy Spirit's presence in us. And one of the characteristics of God's work in us is peace. It's one of the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, and peace. This is a gift that we have. And one of the ways that we nurture that we can nurture that peace that God gives, is by following what God tells us to do. And one of those things is to observe the Sabbath. So you can come to faith, and you can have the Holy Spirit in you, and you have this promise you're going to get peace, and then you defy these commandments, and you live 24/7, and you let yourself live stressed out by everything, and then you're confused about why Christianity isn't working, right? Why isn't it giving me peace? Well, it's not going to give you peace if we don't follow what God tells us to do, and that is to take one day a week and just chill. Now, you can imagine that throughout history, people have thought, I have a better idea, right? We don't need no stinking Sabbath. So here's a couple of examples just from history. During the French Revolution, someone came up with the idea, And it's a great idea in theory. They thought every 7 days it's weird. The calendar is weird because we have some days are, some months are 28 days, 31 days, 30. Let's make it simple and let's have people work. Let's have 10-day weeks. So you could work for 8 or 9 days, and then the 10th day would be the break or the Sabbath or whatever, and that way every month is 3 segments of 10 days each. People hated that. They didn't like it. It didn't work, and they actually had to abandon it after I don't remember, not very long. When Stalin took over Russia, he wanted to help people be more efficient and have better production in the country. And so what he did is he instituted that there was not a Sabbath day, but people would work in different segments of the week and then have other time off. Again, people hated it. And they eventually, it just wasn't working, and they just went back to 7-day weeks because it was sort of like that's just how it worked for people. During World War I, in England, they were really concerned about being able to manufacture more stuff. And they're like, okay, we have crying need for all these guns and planes and ships. We need more production. How about we stop stopping on Sunday, right? We just keep things going on Sunday. Production went down when they did this. And they eventually, after just a few months, they stopped that pattern. They went back to taking a break on Sunday because it wasn't working. Michael Hyatt has written, he writes about kind of like for the business audience, personal growth stuff, being more successful. And this is from his book, Your Best Year Ever. Listen to what he says about this issue of pushing harder, working more in order to get more done. His productivity is less about managing time and more about managing your energy. Most people get this entirely backward. As a result, they work more and more, less and less efficiently. The research shows that after a certain amount of time, we're just chasing our tail. Jack Nevison crunched the numbers from several studies about long work hours, and here's what he found. There's a ceiling for productive work. He calls it the law of 50. Have you heard of this, the law of 50? It stands in stark contrast to the hustle mindset that we have, the hustle fallacy. The rule is simply this: if you push past 50 hours a week, there is no productivity gain. 0. In fact, it can go backward. One study found that 50 hours on the job only yielded about 37 hours of useful work. You know that, right? We get distracted, we go up and go to the bathroom, we walk around, we talk to people. We're actually, in a work week, we're able to really focus and get stuff done a certain percentage of that time. So if you work 50 hours on the job, yields about 37 hours of useful work, but you push that up to 55 hours and it drops to 30. In other words, there's an inverse relationship between how much you work and how productive you are. You are not a robot. You are a person who needs rest to be at your best. Now, I know some of you are very high capacity folks, and I'll just acknowledge that maybe some people are able to arrange their lives and do certain things so that they're able to be productive even beyond this. But I think this is a general principle. I've found it for myself that you keep doing more and more stuff, working more and more, and it's diminishing returns. I'm going to keep coming back to this. because that's how we're built. That's just how we're made. With this need of oscillating between full engagement, focus, get it done, and then relax, renew, restore. And if we try to throw that balance off, it is not going to work. Okay, so how do we do this? Two things. We take time for rest, physical rest. We stop. Sabbath means to cease. We stop doing the other stuff. Psalm 127 says, "In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves." At a certain point, we have to recognize that, again, working more and more is not going to be that helpful. We stop, we let go of that. Mark Buchanan, in his book, The Rest of God, which is also about the Sabbath, he says this: "We are all tired, and we dream of a day when our work is going to be done, when we can finally wash the dust of it from our skin. But that day never comes. We look in vain for the day of our work's completion. But it is mythical, like unicorns and dragons. It's never done. So we dream. But God, out of the bounty of his own nature, held this day apart and stepped fully into it, and then turned and said, 'Come, all you who are weary and heavy laden, come, and I will give you rest. Join me there.'" So part of what we do on Sabbath is we stop from the efforts, the work, the output. And then we find ways of being recharged. So it's about rest, and it's about being recharged. It's about renewal. And renewal in two ways. So first, we find or we need emotional renewal through time with others. Now, you might think, well, Sabbath, you just don't work and just hole up and just isolate. Maybe if you're been super over engaged in external relationships, that might be what you need to do. But in general, to find renewal, we are social beings. We're created in the image of God, and God is relational. And so for renewal, we need connection. We need time with others. And so, we as Christians and the Jews in the Old Testament, they brought together Sabbath as rest, but also Sabbath as the time to gather together with other believers in worship. So the writer of Hebrews says, "Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up the habit of meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." So we make this a part of our Sabbath. The part of that day is to connect with other believers, and in doing that, that helps us to connect with God. So this is, I don't want to go on a rant about this, but let's just say part of the unique challenge we're facing today is we're in the midst of this social experiment. It's never happened in history, but that we have an alternative means of relating to people. We relate to them through screens, the things we write on screens, the things we text back and forth, pictures we send. To some degree, I suppose the FaceTime and Zoom is almost closer to being together, but the way that we're relating to the world, so many of us, it's mediated through screens. We're connecting to screens, we're connecting to pixels and not people. And so maybe for some of us, the habit of Sabbath, the practice that we engage in Sabbath, is going to involve stepping back even from technology so that we can step more into face-to-face real relationships with real people. So Joe Lieberman, I don't know if you remember him. And you may or may not have liked his politics. This is not about his politics. He was a U.S. senator. He was actually a vice presidential candidate with him and Gore, 2000. He was the first Jewish vice presidential candidate we've had. All right. So as a Jew, he had some thoughts about Sabbath. And here's what he wrote. Somewhere, I'm not exactly sure where he wrote this, but this is what he said. He says, Sabbath is a day when we have the opportunity to listen to people in a way we don't during the rest of the week. Our modern secular culture is very visual, often in unhealthy ways. Our eyes are constantly on televisions, video games, computers, email, websites, and all the rest. Many modern workers spend entire days interacting with the video screen. It separates us from the company of other people and from civil interaction and social conversations. The Sabbath forces us to pull our eyes away from the digital flow and rejoin the natural world where communication is accomplished mainly through human voices speaking and human ears listening. The genius of the Sabbath lies in the way that it restricts us from certain activities and thereby frees us to experience others, including conversations, big ones with God and less grand ones with our family and friends. We're going to get into let you think of some practical things for yourself. But I do know some people that place some kind of restrictions around their media, again, not to be legalistic about it, but just as a way to encourage them to have personal connections. Then secondly, obviously, the Sabbath is a time for us to be renewed by renewing our connection with God, by spending time with God. And of course, we do this when we gather in worship. This Leviticus 23 is another list of commandments, and it talks about the Sabbath there. And this is what it says. It says, there are 6 days you may work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of rest and a day of sacred assembly. So, I know how it goes in our world today. There are people that are like, my life is so busy. On Sunday, I don't even want to go to church because that's another thing I just got to do, right? So I'm just going to just chill and just lay around on Sunday. And I'll just say, I believe it's part of how God put this world together, how he shaped you and me. We are shaped in such a way that we are wired for connection. And we find renewal in our walk with God, and we find renewal by connecting with other people. That's part of what we do on Sunday. Okay, so now I've talked, and you've listened, but it's now time for you to think for yourself and just maybe write stuff down on a piece of paper. I don't want to do what my parents did with this. I don't want to turn Sabbath into just a bunch of restrictions. But at the same time, what guidelines do you want to put? Again, without being legalistic about it, but what would help you? That would enable you to have time with God. What could you do so that you would have time with friends on the Sabbath, on Sunday? How should you restrict the work that you do? Maybe does that involve restricting your connection through media? One book Sharon and I are reading, the person talked about they have a digital Sabbath. They are just not on computer. I don't know if that would be helpful to you or not. Just an idea. But take just a minute and just write down the first couple things that come to your mind. What if I'm going to live this commandment out? It's not going to happen just if you hear this stuff and you think, okay, that's a good idea. Then just go back. I mean, we've got to find ways to make this real.